Occupation builds new settlement housing units in Jerusalem. UN demands for the end of the siege on Gaza and the opening of Rafah crossing. Israeli occupation detains tens of Palestinians in the West Bank. A severe cold snap hits Palestine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the weekly news report about the most prominent updates from Palestine for the past week. And as usual, we start from Jerusalem, where the Zionist settlers continue storming Masjid al-Aqsa on a daily basis with Jewish groups under the protection of the Israeli occupation police, in attempts to impose a new reality that keeps the presence of the Jews in the yards of the masjid. While the occupation police obstruct the movement of the Palestinian citizens into the masjid by implying strict and punitive measures to prevent the arrival of worshippers and deport the stationed Jerusalemites from Al-Aqsa. In a separate issue, Israeli occupation authorities ratified the project of building 64 new housing units in the occupied city of Jerusalem, where the so-called Israeli Local Committee for Planning and Building in the occupied Jerusalem ratified this week a project to build 64 new housing units in the neighborhood of Ramot, northwest of Jerusalem. This comes in the frame of the policies of the Israeli government, which continues the expansion of the settlements by building new housing units on the Palestinian occupied lands. From another side, the Zionist settlers tried on Tuesday to seize a house that belongs to the family of Sab Laban in the Uqba al-Khalidiyya in ancient Jerusalem. The house owner, Ahmed Sab Laban, explained that the settlers tried to break into his house, accompanied by a group of people from Israeli immigration, to take over the house after losing the case in the Israeli magistrates' courts. The assault is considered one of the ongoing violations and attacks implemented against the Palestinian civilians by the Jews in different areas in the West Bank. And moving to the detainees issue, Israeli occupation authorities detained more than 30 Palestinians in sporadic areas in the West Bank during the past week in campaigns of raids and storming to houses of the Palestinian citizens. In the same context, the occupation performed wide movements to detainees in Hadarim prison. The Prisoners Club said on Tuesday evening that the Israeli occupation jails performed a campaign of wide movements among the Palestinian detainees in Hadarim prison. According to the statement issued by the Prisoners Club, that campaign of movements in Hadarim prison, which consists more than 100 detainees, comes as part of the policies followed by the Israeli Jails Administration to undermine the regulatory bodies of the detainees within the prisons. The statement pointed that the campaigns of movements carried out by the Israeli Jails Administration to a number of prisons since more than 2 weeks, targeting many leaders in prisons, most notably of Nafha, Rimond, Megiddo, and Ofar prison. And looking at the issue of Gaza siege and reconstruction, the United Nations humanitarian coordinator James Rowley called to end the imposed siege on Gaza Strip for 8 years, demanding the Egyptian authorities to open the Rafah crossing. In a conference held at Al-Shifa Hospital on Tuesday, Rowley ensured the necessity of lifting the siege imposed on the Gaza Strip to allow the provision of health services to the citizens. During speaking about the siege on Gaza, Rowley asked the international community that promised to fund the government and reconstruction of Gaza to meet their promises, stressing the need for Egypt to open Rafah crossing to enable patients to travel for treatment and to introduce medical aid to citizens. In a different context, Palestinians protested on the border areas with the buffer zone, where young Palestinians at the beginning of the week ignited tires on the border areas east of the Gaza Strip during a march arranged by the National Body Movement to break the siege, demanding the break of the unjust siege and calling for reconstruction of Gaza. At the same time, the Israeli occupation forces opened fire on the protesters, resulting in no injuries. And finally, Palestine is being exposed to a deep cold snap that hits the region these days, where it began on Monday evening and climatologists expect that it will continue till early next week and warn of the danger of the rapid speed of wind. On the other hand, the cold snap aggravates the suffering of thousands of Gazans, especially the owners of the destroyed homes who live in caravans and mobile houses and face severe conditions due to the lack of reconstruction material. And that's all we have for our report today. Till we meet again in our next report. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.